Hello, and welcome to the Copilot Connection. I'm here because it's just me today to share with you all the latest news, insights, and capabilities of the Microsoft Copilot ecosystem across the entire Microsoft stack. I'm Kevin McDonnell, MVP, Viva Explorer, and Copilot Strategy and Modern Workplace AI lead at Avanade. We'll be releasing episodes as podcasts and on YouTube with insights from experts from the community and Microsoft on what the different areas of Copilot are, the impact they can make to you and your organization, and what you need to do to prepare for them or start implementing now. And even, as we'll talk a lot about today, how you can extend them. You may have noticed there's no Zoe here this week, but we thought with Microsoft Build 2024 out there, we'd bring in one of those experts that I was talking about. So, Garry, would you like to say hello?
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Kev. Hi, everyone. My name is Garry Trinder. I'm a developer advocate at Microsoft, focused on Microsoft 365 and, as you guessed it, Copilot. So it's nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
And so someone from Microsoft focused on Copilot. Blimey, who would have thought of that at the moment on there? So, and we're going to focus a lot on extensibility and the stories that have come from there from builds this week. I was about to say last week. It has been a long week, it's fair to say. And then there was quite a few other announcements and bits and pieces from builds. So Zoe next week's going to do another recording, and hopefully we'll have we will have a guest. Hopefully Chris Huntingford, if we can pin him down at some point. But certainly Zoe will be on with someone to cover some of the other news on there. Just before we get into build, a reminder about Month of Copilot will be in the newsletter on there. We've got a huge number lined up. I meant to see how many recordings we've already had sent through, but a good number already there and being lined up, ready to share across all the different Copilots, and hopefully some special guests that we're trying to line up as well, which reminds me I must chase those from there. The other one on some of the other news, and Garry, you weren't over in Orlando for the M365 conference, were you?
Unfortunately not. No, I was at home.
Yeah, sadly, although one. And neither was I, but they have made some of these sessions available. So we'll put links to these in the show notes. The reason is I can see there was one of the Age of Copilots, Reshaping Productivity with Copilot for Microsoft 365 by Bobby Kishore and Dan Parrish. I saw them speak at the MVP Summit. So if they cover any sort of thing like that, that will be a really good watch. I haven't had a chance to see these with all the things going on within there. But while this is across the M365 stack, some really great Copilot sessions in there. So keep an eye out for those. But I think we're going to kick off with the build. And before I ask you on your thoughts, Garry, Vlad Catrinescu did a really good recap. And I know I asked you about this before the show. And you said, yeah, I've seen a few people tweet that or watch it at some point. And you hadn't watched it. So he's done a recap, and we'll play a little bit of this. Hopefully this comes through in the notes, and just to kind of get some reaction. But I think this summarizes nicely from the keynote what was talked about.
Good morning. It's fantastic to be back here at Microsoft Build. The first is Microsoft Copilot, Copilot plus PCs, Windows Copilot Runtime, Windows Copilot Library.
Hey, Copilot, how's it going?
Copilot apps, GitHub Copilot, GitHub Copilot, GitHub Copilot, GitHub Copilot for Azure, Copilot,
GitHub Copilot,
Copilot,
gracias,
think
Copilot.
You probably get the idea now. So Vlad had a very tongue-in-cheek, fantastic example of that. All the times in the keynotes that Copilot was mentioned.
Yeah, it was quite a lot, right? Over 100, I think it was mentioned in about 2 hours.
I had a look on Twitter, and it was mentioned 139 mentions of Copilot, which is quite impressive.
I think, kind of joking aside, I think it just kind of shows the breadth of where generative AI is being placed across the Microsoft stack. Azure, GitHub, M365, wherever you're working, AI is kind of going to be touching those areas, trying to help you, give you, different ways of working. So yeah, it's a bit Copilot overload, but yeah, it's
And it's
all different.
it's interesting because Build traditionally has been the more developer focused conference. So for me, coming from that modern workplace view, looking at that Copilot, we're kind of looking at this this is things that are going to be coming into the core part of the platform soon rather than right now in many cases. Obviously, you can use some of the tools they're talking about here to build your own Copilot, and we'll touch a bit on that later. But it's almost that forward view of what's going to happen, which is always interesting from this conference.
Yeah, so I think definitely this year there was still plenty of announcements around things that have landed and things that you can use. Certainly from a Microsoft 365 perspective, it was building on top of the announcements that you've probably already seen from Ignite. So new capabilities that are now going to be coming, so that you can kind of say, okay, well, if you've been looking at like how to extend Copilot for Microsoft 365, then you might have gone, oh, well, I can't do this or I can't do that. There's different options now available to you. So revisit them and have a look at, fresh to say, oh, okay, actually now that's interesting. Maybe we can do something like with these new features in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to catch up on all the things, we'll have this in the show notes, the Build 2024 book of news. Do you know, I just thought I should have used Copilot to check how many times Copilot is mentioned in this. That might be something I try while you're talking a bit later on there. What I liked going through this is, again, lots of talk about Copilot, lots of talk about AI, open AI and things like that. But there was lots of other things in there, not something we'd necessarily focus on so much in the show. Let me see if I can get into some of it. AI was obviously up the top, but there were kind of new enhancements to Azure functions, things like the containers and Kubernetes, video dubbing. I loved this. That was kind of translating videos and things on there. So it was good to see they haven't completely ignored all those other things that came through as well. And it's definitely worth digging through that. And I'm hoping Zoe and Chris might talk about some of the Fabric announcements, which did include some Copilot stuff and other bits there. So there's plenty for non-Copilot focused people to dig into and have a look at as well.
Yeah, certainly. I think it's the, with a few days of build with the keynotes, obviously it's the highlights that kind of get talked about, but there is absolutely tons of work going on like across the Microsoft stack. So yeah, the book of news is definitely the place to scour over the next few days and check out on the recordings as well, because you can't do them all, right? You can't sit there and watch them all.
And I can't remember if I've talked to you much about this, as I did on one of the P&P sessions. You could obviously run a script, download all those videos, run a transcription service and point a custom Copilot at it, make sure you have plenty of credits and make sure you're ready to pay for that. If you do, is all I would say to that on there. I've distracted myself now by trying to run Copilot against the book of news. Stop it, Kev. Stop it. A few of the things I think I've managed to watch the keynote. I have to admit, I haven't watched a huge number of the sessions. Too much going on, as is always the case. For me, there was one standout moment from the keynote, and we've seen a lot about GPT 4.0 and the capabilities with that. I loved that Microsoft had GPT 4.0 available in Azure OpenAI the same day as it was available in OpenAI. So I thought that was very clever. But what they showed was using that with a custom Copilot built into a website. They built up a mock company called Contoso Outdoor, and they were showing, instead of having a kind of chat bot as you often have from websites, they had a video, and it was a live conversation with I'm trying not to say Copilot or bot, a virtual assistant, let's call it, could talk to, and it was showing your video. And I'm trying to think who was it? Seth Juarez, wasn't it? talking there, and he was doing things like asking questions, and the speed of GPT 4.0, that it was a very natural conversation. It wasn't sat there waiting for things. And he held up a shoe and said, "I've got this shoe. Could you tell me a bit about what you have available?" And it knew to go and get information from the stock and be able to answer questions. He then flipped over to Spanish. I would say Angel Dil Carrero noted in a chat, not very good Spanish, very Latino Spanish. He commented on that, but it actually handled that and returns back in that. And I was just blown away. That just showed me the power of some of these engines that are coming through there as well.
Yeah, I think the big thing demonstration was something that was like very much like, oh wow, this is something different. But I think it kind of shows now like the multimodal approach that we're getting from generative AI, where we've kind of moved then from putting things in a text box, putting things into like ChatGPT, but that's kind of limiting, right? You've got things around you in the world. Isn't it great then that you, like say, just show a shoe and then the system being able to understand and take in that as context to then understand what you're doing. It's like, it's better than just going, oh, okay, now I need to type out my shoe that I've, this is what I've got kind of thing. It's not always the best way of doing things. One of the things that really got me was the fact that, yes, switching language was just immediate. The other thing was stopping the Copilot as well from talking. It was like interrupting Copilot. And that's interesting as well, is that it can just stop and then carry on. And from a developer perspective as well, I'm thinking, think of the things that you would have had to have attempted to try and get that to work before. And now this is kind of like baked into the models that you can use. It's really interesting to see where, people are going to take this new technology.
Yeah. What I would say though is, I've seen Terminator, I've seen Skynet. Please don't interrupt Copilot too much. It might remember it. It shouldn't. I know it doesn't remember things, but just in case, just remember that. It's got me nervous on there.
It's interesting how we both slipped into Copilot then, actually. And it wasn't Copilot. It was using just generative AI, but we're using Copilot as the term.
But it was a Copilot, small c in that case.
There we go.
Good point. Good point. Come back to on the Copilot news. There was kind of a pre-build announcement about this Copilot Plus PC, this amazing new hardware. I know our former colleague, who's still a colleague of yours, Al Erdley, was very excited about getting a new laptop and then found out he didn't have the very latest one with that hardware. But it's all about having those, NPU, having those neural processing unit chips on that device that will help offload locally a lot of that capability to run. So I know there's been talk of things like background blur within Teams actually goes up to the cloud. I think more the Teams Premium, where you're kind of replacing with there, that uses AI. That goes up to cloud, uses a lot of battery life. By bringing that onto that focused chip, it's not only increasing performance, it's also increasing the battery life. And also what was announced was the kind of Windows dev side to make use of that. So bringing to that local development model within there. I know you're going to talk a little bit about some of the excitement with that, but I was really intrigued by that, and it was good at the keynote. You could hear the old school Windows devs who are getting very excited. It's good to know they're still about from there and still making use, that it's not just web these days. So I'm really interested to see how that world evolves. That to me was a classic build. We haven't got anything using this yet. Here's the capability. Go and wow us with what can be done. So really, really looking forward to hearing more on that.
Yeah, and the hardware side of it is like, maybe we don't talk about it because we just think of kind of like, oh yeah, AI is just cloud services, right? But getting the benefits of running things locally, not having to send things over the wire, waiting for the network capacity as well. As we know, it takes a lot of resources to power these systems as well. So offloading it to the devices makes total sense because you get a better experience as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it does make me feel old when you have this cycle of it's all going to the cloud and being central. It's coming to the local machine. It's all going to the cloud and being central. And yeah, I won't say how many cycles of that I feel I'm on at the moment.
The eternal battle, right?
Yeah, it's making me feel old, definitely on there. The flip side to being old is being young and learning and education. And there was a small bit of news, but as a Cub Scout leader, really excited me, and that's the VS Code for education. So really kind of having that learning capability, especially in this world, Python's really becoming the language that a lot of people are starting with things like Scratch connecting over with Python, and having a specific VS Code for that. So very small comment on that. I'll put links in the show note, but really excited about what that means to kind of educating the young with that. And then the other one I was intrigued, again, not specific Copilot, but they talked about GPT-4 being able to be trained with your organization's content. And to me, it also talks about having almost the voice of your organization loaded in with that model, so you can have that central model. I've loved this idea that where we have brand assets, we have images, we have fonts, we have logos that organizations are very focused on. To me, the same should be there for prompts. This is how we should talk as an organization. This is how we should expect, whether it's internal or external things, to come through. And I love that idea that you can now kind of load that into that GPT-4 model itself. Still a large language model, still looking that kind of cloud hosted, but being able to train that with things specific to your organization, I thought was very interesting, because I like those large bits on there as well. Garry, any particular things that caught your eye on the broader aspects?
Yeah, so I've been tracking these things for a little while, but it was nice to see the Phi 3 models being talked about, which is the opposite to what you're talking about, Kev, about large language models. This is the small language models, and the benefits that you can get from using these smaller models, which can perform as well as some of these larger models, but because they're
I'm going to put you on the spot slightly. For those who haven't heard about LLMs and SLMs, what's the difference apart from one's large and one's small?
I guess in the sense of, to kind of really dumb it down, is that you need a hell of a lot more resources to run something like a chat GPT model, like you mentioned, running it in the cloud, right? There's a lot of power that it needs. It's very general, so it's trained on public data as well, masses of data. So it like I say, it needs those resources to give you responses in like an adequate time. Really, with the small language models, they're not as big, but what we're finding is that the responses can be as good as you would get from a GPT-4, but maybe it falls down in other areas. But for if you're wanting to go down the route of maybe making a specialized Copilot, right, you could start with an SLM, which you can run just on a normal desktop, right? I have Phi 3 running on my desktop, and it is very quick.
I think they can even
everything is
run
local
on phones at times as well, aren't they? And
exactly.
like
and this is the thing, is that it's moving LLMs, it's moving the language models down from like big cloud services down to almost the level of, you can run it on a desktop, you can run it on a laptop, you can run it on a phone, and have those generative AI capabilities locally to your device, which solves quite a bit of problems, because there's always talk about, well, where's my data going, what is being trained on, all these conversations that people are
low
asking.
bandwidth situations for frontline workers.
Exactly. Disconnected devices as well, where it can run locally, and you can do things like RAG on that as well. You can fine tune it. You can even train it yourself on your custom data, your private data, which I look at that as a vision towards the future.
Yeah, that's fascinating, that ability to kind of train it with your data and have that model. I thought that was really nice.
And one of the things that we announced was the AI toolkit for VS Code as well, which helps you do that. It helps you like be able to fine tune and train these models. The training obviously needs a lot of resources, and you can use cloud services to do that. But I see the real benefits of using these small models in these other use cases are really interesting. It's like it's something to keep an eye on, basically, because I think on device AI is probably where in my mind, definitely it's like that to me is the future. But it remains to be seen, right? I'm interested. So if you've not heard about them, not heard about Phi3, definitely go check it out and just try it, is all I'd say.
Yeah, and I think also what I liked, and I think I might be wrong, but this was the first announcements of some of those multimodal SLMs as well. So there's Phi3 Vision, so that ability to kind of view, put images on there and recognize images locally as well, which I thought was really interesting. So I think I know many of we have some people who listen who are on the development side would be happy to go and play with these. Others, there's certainly bits of Phi3 you can go and in the same way you use ChatGPT, there's easy ways to wrap around that and use it, which are worth looking at and understanding again how close they are. What I'm finding fascinating, one of the things I love about working at Avanade is we have such a broad range of people. We have the modern work, the kind of users and adopters and extensions of Copilot and things, and we have our data and AI team who are really getting into the nitty gritty and trying to get that understanding of, I should use an existing Copilot. I should extend. I should customize it. I should go full in training this Phi3 model and using it there specific for there and working out those use cases. That's a really interesting point, and I think a really evolving point for everyone, because these things are moving so fast. Everyone's kind of learning in their little worlds on there, and there's a few people, I think so, and I hopefully fit in that bucket of trying to connect those things together and sort of say, but when would you do this? When would you do this? When would you do this? And trying to bring that understanding a little bit. And it's very hard when these things are moving so quickly on there, but fascinating at the same time. Maybe talking about specializing, we did say that we'd focus more on extensibility. So I think it's probably now a good time and maybe to kick that off, Garry. The build is about what you can do, is about all those magical things that gets announced and excited on there. Before we get into what, maybe we should start on why we're talking about extensibility so much.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, extensibility is something that it's obviously talked about at build, but I think there's a few people questioning, well, why would I need to do this? Because surely it's Copilot, it's AI. Surely AI does everything, right? And whilst it does a lot, and certainly Copilot for Microsoft 365, right? It's already connected to your organizational data in Microsoft 365. Is that the reality is your organization doesn't have all of its data in Microsoft 365. You have other systems, you have line of business systems.
Suggesting some people don't have their stuff in Microsoft?
Exactly. You see, but it could be line of business systems that you have built yourselves, running on maybe your own infrastructure, or actually running in the cloud. It could be third-party services as well, and that is your company data. So what you would want is, well, when I go to Copilot, I want it to understand where all my data is so that it can connect to it, so that when I ask it a question, it's reasoning over all of the data in our organization and then being able to give me a more accurate answer, so that we don't have these gaps. So when we talk about extensibility, we're really thinking about how do we connect Copilot to these different systems that we have. In some cases, that might be taking some data and bringing in that data to M365. It could be, just going and getting the data as and when we need it. There's lots of different options. And there's also different use cases as well now of like, okay, what do we want from a end user experience as well? So moving away from, okay, I just have this one Copilot of I have a text box. It's like, we've got Copilot in Teams, we've got Copilots in the different Office products as well. And as the product evolves, those different kind of entry points to Copilot, if you like, you'll want to have the knowledge of your organization available, so that it doesn't matter where you are. You ask a question, Copilot will be able to go and access your data and then provide you with a good answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think The nice thing I liked about Build was they're starting to evolve that story about taking action with those plugins as well. So getting that information, getting that knowledge, but also taking action. So things like ServiceNow raising a task within there, logging a case within things like Salesforce, and as you say, your own line of business applications within there. That was interesting. I think also when it comes to the why, I like to think about this as scaling out. What you've talked about there is bringing, opening up to more information, not necessarily bringing it in. I caught myself there on there, but being able to connect to that wider world that's outside your scope of the Copilot, which could be Microsoft 365, it could be your Dynamics and your for service, for sales, etc., for finance. Almost let things slip there. Shush. But the other side for it then is scaling in. So because Copilot has all this information, there are times it's not always perfect at getting to the right thing. If we look at things like search, if we go back to the old SharePoint search view, it would search everything, but it wouldn't necessarily find the right thing if you were looking, say, for a particular policy. And we had bookmarks and the various different things it's been called over the years that would say, if someone searches for this phrase, I want to pin this towards the top. And with scaling in, it's a little bit like that with the extensibility. If someone's asking about policies, whether that's HR policies, IT policies, I want to be able to scope it to that kind of bit of knowledge of those actions that are taken within there. And I think the extensibility also allow those conversations to come in. I've been trying to tell this story. I change it slightly depending on who I'm talking to, but I started off thinking about Hamleys, that I want to go there. I want to find out about some Lego and what's available. So I go to Hamleys, giant toy shop in London, if you haven't heard of it. And I go to walking through the door and I ask someone there. Now, they know a little bit about everything, but they won't know that specific information. So they'll say, you want to go and speak to the Lego person on the, I think it's the 5th floor. You can tell I've been there too much. And you'll go up there, speak to that person. They may have the knowledge, or they may have to go and kind of look it up from there and return, maybe is this in stock? Is it available? When's it going to be coming there? They may know it, or they may extend there. And the kind of Copilot story does that, because with Copilot, I don't need to actively go and walk in there. I can ask that question, and behind the scenes, with the extensibility, you can connect up those different things to give me the answer straight away. But actually, there's lots of different things happening behind that to make it happen. So from the end user perspective, there's a single pane of glass to go to, but we can add that specific expertise and route people towards the intent of what they want to get with that as well. And that's why I love the extensibility, because we're not necessarily, in many cases, not teaching people new ways of doing things. They just have to ask the questions that would be natural to them, and we're helping Copilot get to the answer in a more effective way.
Yeah, definitely. I absolutely agree with what you're saying. It's like at the moment having a search capability that goes everywhere. But if you're looking for a specific area, you can't just go, just look in that bit, right? With search, you can, you can filter down and say, just search within this particular site, for example. But Copilot is very much like it's going across everything. It's always going to your emails. It's always going to SharePoint sites, documents that you might have, played around with or commented on. It's going to do all of that. But that's not necessarily an efficient way of doing things. Like I said, sometimes you already know where it is. The expertise. So I want that expert, right, within my organization to go ask about. And that's something it's
like, hey, vacation Copilot, how much leave have I got left?
Exactly. And it's that where we're starting now to see that change. So to kind of step back a bit in terms of the whole kind of extensibility story that was talked about at Build, we talk about Copilot extensibility as Copilot extensions now. So when you hear Copilot extensions, that's the term of, here are my options that I've got, right? And these are options that you can extend Copilot as a whole. So like the global search, if you like, but then how you can extend Copilot to have these really focused, specialized, tailored experiences, which has a difference on the user experience as well. So if we step back and look at things that you might already know this, but if you don't, just to recap, you've got the ability with graph connectors to bring data into M365, so it becomes part of Copilot's knowledge, right? It's inside your data boundary, inside M365 from your external system. You need to keep that up to date, maybe refresh that, but there's no user interaction required. They search and they will get answers, and Copilot will go search that external data. The other option was plugins, but plugins is a way of connecting in real time. So making a real-time call to a external system that you've got, get data from a database, really good for data that is frequently being updated, and you just want the latest information, and that is brought into the Copilot conversation that you've got, and adds it as context. But that requires you as a user to say, hey, I need to enable this plugin. So I've got options now, and in my prompt, I need to think about how that plugin kind of gets invoked as well. So those are the two options. But the third one now is kind of like grouping those together. So we've got a declarative Copilot, as it's called now, that is a tailored version of the larger Copilot. But the benefits here is you can give that Copilot instructions. So this is, hey, Copilot, this Copilot, I want you to behave in this particular way. So, it might be customer service, product support queries or something like that. So you can really kind of make it into, helpful assistant, but specialized. You can help with these queries, blah, blah, blah. So that defines how it should interact with the person who's using it. The next part is what knowledge it has. So rather than it having all of the knowledge of the organization, you can say, you just need to know this information about products. We have our product information.
Scaling in, isn't it? Yeah,
exactly. We have that product information maybe brought in by a graph connector, or it's stored in a SharePoint site, or other data sources which you can use. But it's that idea of your constraining the Copilot so that it doesn't go, I'm going to check all your emails and everything and find absolutely everything and return it back. It's like, no, here's our, like, maybe you've got a curated set of documents in your organization. You only want those documents to be part of the response. Then a declarative Copilot will give you that. And then to layer that on, you've got plugins in declarative Copilots. But because the Copilot knows which plugins it's got available, it's not an explicit action on the end user. They're just there. Right. So again, from an end user perspective, it makes it a little bit easier because you're working in a particular domain, right? That Copilot is a specialist in. So when we talk about declarative Copilots, like what you said, Kev, it's like, HR Copilot, finance Copilot, whatever you need, right? It's a tailored experience that you can create either through, Visual Studio Code, or even like Copilot Studio.
Yeah, and the other thing I'd say that's changed, that if people might have looked at plugins in Copilot for Microsoft 365 in the past, there's a little teeny box, and I'm lucky enough to be in the MVP sandbox, but last time I counted, I think there was about 60 plugins, and you scroll up and down, and it made me a little nervous, because as organizations get more and more plugins connecting to more things, it's going to get harder and harder to find and turn those on. But I think there's been a shift to that model that's going to be a bit more like Copilot Pro, which is the Microsoft Copilot, the one you see being on there, the kind of consumer-facing one, where you can see those plugins down the right. They were called GPTs within there. I think where I've got to make sure I get the naming convention, but I think they are now being called, is it extensions with those on the right? I know Jeff Teeper talked about those as part of the keynote. So it's going to become easier to discover those. And again, I think you touched on this, that you can mention those as well. So where the name of them, you can bring that up. It isn't going to be the only way to invoke those. If you, if you say, what is my vacation on there, Copilot will still have that intelligence to route towards that plugin. So you don't have to always mention it, but if you want to be very specific and make sure you do, you've got that capability as well. So I really like that change to the model to make it easier to bring those plugins front and center for everyone. I felt they felt quite technical, and you had to really make an effort to get towards those. I think with this evolution, there's going to be less of that, and it's easier to see what's available and what you can bring into there as well.
Yeah, and to mention Jeff and in his keynote, then it was the copilots in SharePoint, which was incredibly easy, intuitive. Of that, you've got a document library, you're already working in SharePoint, you want to be able to reason over those documents. You can now click of a button, create a copilot that's grounded in that data. And then share that with others as well. And then once that's created, there's then abilities to extend that with Copilot Studio. But it's making it very easy for people to be able to create these kind of experiences, like specialized, tailored experiences that helps you get more relevant, accurate answers for whatever questions you want to ask, rather than oh, I need to search everything.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things I love about not working for Microsoft is that I love spreading the joy of these things, but I can also highlight some of the concerns. So feel free, Garry, to not comment on some of these bits, because you mentioned there I can go in and have these copilots in SharePoint, and I can create that and share with everyone. So we're kind of saying that anyone in a large organization could go in and create this SharePoint and share that. And I'm sure many of you are going, governance. How are we going to maintain those? I think that's going to be an interesting thing to watch. And I hope that we will see some more tools. I like that Microsoft's going to kind of make this available and get people, encouraging them to use this and get moving, not blocking it from the start. But I hope we'll see that fairly rapid follow-up in ways to kind of look at, is it being used? If it's not, can we remove it and hide it? Can we maintain? I'm sure third parties, we have Michael Pisarek from Orchestry, we've got people like Rencor, AvePoint, many others that are out there. We'll hopefully follow up and look at these as the governance, but I do have a slight concern with that. I think helping organizations to manage these effectively will become something very important, following up soon on that as well.
Yeah, of course. And the things that have been shown at Build, a lot of these things that we've talked about are private preview. So things that we have announced, they are not complete. We go through private preview with specific customers. We then do like public preview before then obviously getting to GA, where things then are more stable. So that is the time for feedback. So we need to hear this feedback to make the changes that are going to be needed for organizations to use this effectively. The one thing I will say is it does come back down to the basics of what is your security like, as well. What is your governance around the documents? Because you as a user still need to access those documents. It's not that it's, oh, now we've got a copilot, it's now open. It's still grounded in the security models in M365 as well. That's the benefits of using AI with Microsoft 365, because you get all those security controls out of the box, which we've been using and accustomed to for years, and that still applies to Copilot. So I think that would be the one thing, is make sure that house is in order as well.
I completely agree. And if people want a deeper dive in that, go back and check out our episodes with Michael on Copilot readiness, looking at the importance of that and different ways to do it within there as well. I think we covered a lot in there. I think still there's the again, look at the MVP sandbox and the number of Copilot plugins in there called demo or test, things like that, and things like policy Copilot. We've seen the same thing happen with Teams, where here's my finance teams. Like, oh, is that the IT finance, the sales finance, the finance, and things like that? So we see these things happen. To me, I think it's important that we get this capability out, and we have people to challenge and say these are things that need to follow up pretty soon afterwards. But let's not build all the things in there straight away and block the innovation and ideas from happening until we really need to. So hopefully we'll see that follow up come through. And yeah, completely agree with sorting out the security that picks up as well. So in terms of creating these, and I think you touched on this a bit, Garry, what I really loved from Build is it felt like there was a more solid pro code story. So you've got those ability with things like Teams toolkits to create these graph connectors. You've got the Teams message extensions available within there. You've also got Copilot. You've got the Power Platform side, and you've got the Copilot Studio way of building on these as well. So there is that low code and pro code, and it was great hearing Jeff in the keynote pushing both sides, because I feel Copilot Studio at times has had a little bit more focus in the other areas. So it was good to see both of those mentioned within that. One thing I got very excited, and I'm going to bring up my screen, is you touched on that ability to add knowledge. And I always love it at Build when they announce something and make that preview available straight away. Copilot Studio updated, I think it was on Tuesday overnight. I will give a shout out to Mark Rackley for his bravery. On Wednesday, he was doing a Copilot Studio training session to several hundred people at Avanade. And he had to rewrite pretty much all of it because suddenly it all changed. So huge kudos to him to actually get that running and show some of the new stuff that had come in there from that. But you can see it's bringing more of those knowledge sources, where before there was kind of SharePoint and OneDrive and files and public websites. There's now that preview of Dataverse coming in there, but also those enterprise data elements, which is a combination of those Power Platform connectors that are available and those graph connectors, and I loved seeing this. For those looking at the screen, I can see I've had my Viva Learning app that's in there, my Pokemon connector that I love demoing on there, the Salesforce connector, the ServiceNow, and it's so good seeing the kind of speed with which these things come available. I have distracted myself slightly by seeing ADO Git, which seems to be Git and Azure DevOps. I'm intrigued. I guess that's the Git side of Azure DevOps that you can connect to versus the wiki side. But I hadn't noticed it called that before. That has me intrigued.
Yeah, usually it's Azure repos
inside
Azure DevOps.
That's
right? Okay.
Yeah, so that seems to be a rename. Anyway, absolutely. What I love about this is, before, if we were talking about graph connectors, there was a lot of kind of code involved. It became a low to pro code. Now we're starting to see more of the wizard connections with this. It's become a little bit easier. Having played around with some, there's a little way to go. I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's certainly a big step towards that, and worth looking at. I would give a caveat when looking at these. If you are looking at those graph connections, they will only work in Copilot Studio if you have a Microsoft Copilot license. We assume that's a Copilot for Microsoft 365, but have asked that question to Microsoft on there. But if you want to use those graph connectors in Copilot Studio, you need that license on there. I would also see notes, and I'm still testing to get this working, but you need to set up authentication. So there's a few steps with running that, building app registrations that are a little bit more complex than click. So I'm hoping to get some videos over the next few weeks. Well, A, get it working, and B, then get some videos and share some things on how to do that. But I thought it was really good to see that there is really that support for that low code and pro code capabilities coming through still.
Yeah, and on that point, I think that it's the different organizations have different needs. There was a great slide actually in the developer's guide to customizing Copilot session run by Jeremy Thake and Barnum Bora that goes into the code approach and the low code approach, and maybe the considerations that you would want to have in mind when using either approach. So it's great that things are made more accessible through the user interface. interface, like what you just showed there, Kev. That is, clicking around, getting things set up. But it's like there's some downsides to working in a platform. Sometimes you don't have the full visibility. What about source control, other things that you might need? If you're an independent software vendor, do you want to use Power Platform, or do you want the control of using code? There's all sorts of different considerations, and there's different ways of going about this. If you've got multi-tenants, if you've got single tenants as well. So keeping all that in mind as to which approach is best for you is something that, I encourage everyone to try out. Definitely use Copilot Studio. It's the fastest way to extend Copilot, thinking of, there are certain limitations that you may hit by building in a platform, but there is the pro code side to fall back on as well. So definitely keep both options in mind.
I'm going to hide the slides a sec, because you've reminded me we're going to talk about this, and I completely forgot, because Jeremy's made those slides available, and we will put those into the show notes. What I would say is go and watch the session, because the conversations that happen around it, and again, we'll put the slides in there around that as well. There we go. That's the slide I was looking for. Because what sort of Jeremy adds towards this is well worth watching the conversation. And just because Garry, you were talking about that kind of what to use when, there's some great examples, and this is some of my favorite. I've seen various people talking about, well, if you've got low code people, go low code. If you've got pro, go that. This was the great one that picked up a few other things. So, if you've got existing Power Platform solutions, you want to move fast, as you were touching on there, you've got that managed infrastructure. Great Copilot Studios there. But if you've got things like a multi-tenant deployment and you want to deploy it across tenants, then exactly you were talking about, that source control, that ability to maintain that, branching those releases, being able to manage that infrastructure and scale that to the way that you want the control, then you're edging towards that pro code Teams toolkit. So well worth digging into that session and having a look at that. I'm going to jump back to what I showed, and we'll talk through this for everyone. I know many people listen rather than watch, so we'll make sure we cover the different things on there, because I loved also that he was talking about the kind of different layers. And I know Satya talked about the layers of Copilot, of having those models and things, but this was more about, I've got too far now, where's it gone? The fundamentals of those extensions. So I don't know, Garry, do you want to talk through these at all?
Yeah, so it's good to know. It's good to know the layers, right? Of kind of like, it's almost a way of thinking, well, what am I getting through Copilot for M365 as well, and what am I building on top of? Because on one side there's extending, Copilot. There's the other side of it where it's going and building your own, right? And going and building your own is like, okay, yeah, I can just go and do that. But then there's other things that you need to think of. So kind of starting at the bottom with the foundational models, this is where we're talking about the large language models, ChatGPT,
or the small language models potentially.
All the small language models, that foundational model, that generative AI model that you're going to use. So obviously in Copilot, that is something that is abstracted away from you. That's part of the service. But if you're building your own, hey, you get to choose whatever you like for whatever needs that you want. Then you've got the orchestrator on top. So obviously Microsoft 365 has an orchestrator that will go and take your prompt and say, oh, I need to go and find some data from different sources. Here's the sources that I've got available. Which one should I choose? That decision maker, if you like. I like
to talk to it as that user intent mapping. What is the user trying to get to? It's the bit that works out that connects to whether it's that knowledge, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, exactly. And that reasoning part of understanding and then acting upon what has been asked. Obviously, the next side is then the knowledge. So what data is available to that system as well. Obviously, Copilot for Microsoft 365 by default, its knowledge is Microsoft 365, but that could be also external systems as well, and being able to access that. Triggers, being able to kind of run automation. So when something happens, use generative AI to understand, okay, something happened, what do I now need to do? And that could be to, start a workflow, and automate that kind of side of things, but using natural language, actions as well. So, based on that prompt that the users put in, maybe like invoke a plugin, for example, like, oh, I need to get this data from this external system. I have a plugin that can do that. I need to pass it some information to get some information back. It makes that action on your behalf. And then the instructions as well, which is, how should you behave? And these are different things that are relevant to the different options. And I think the next slide that you'll show, Kev, is, here are all the different options that we talked about, using these extensibility options in isolation with just a graph connector or a plugin, and then how they actually combine when being used in a declarative Copilot. And then versus the, if you decide to go on your own, like you want to build your own Copilot that is not using Copilot for Microsoft 365, where are the differences? Where do you have to then think about, which orchestrator do I use? Which LLM do I use? So this is the layers that we're talking about. And, I feel we're kind of back to a bit of the, remember the pizza slide, the IaaS and PIAs, PAS and SaaS, it's like, it's a piece of the pizza, right? That some bits you have to deal with, other bits you don't. The benefits of using a managed system versus maybe the disadvantages. All these things need to be taken into consideration when you're kind of thinking down this route. And I've seen a lot of people go in rush and building their own custom Copilots, like maybe because they didn't want to pay the license, or it wasn't, maybe we didn't understand, what the capabilities of Copilot for Microsoft 365. But on the flip side, you've got a lot of work that you need to manage and maintain off the back of that. So we're back into the scenario of the do I use managed? Do I use do I build my own? Which is again the like centralized and decentralized that we talked about before, right? It's the eternal battle. Yeah, hopefully the information from Build is helping people make better decisions as well as to which option is right for them or for their customers as well.
Absolutely, and I think that's the important thing, is to take in those considerations. For those who can't see the screen, and we'll put in the show notes, there is a link to aka.ms/extend Copilot M365/decide, and the team that put this session together have got a great page of all those different things you should think about. And there's value to this. There's what is going to be the cost of going Copilot for M365, the cost of extending and building. There's a cost of building your own custom Copilot versus the benefits you're going to get, which I think all need to be thought about, because there's certainly some interesting costs you need to think about and modeling when you're bringing these custom Copilots and doing things like Azure OpenAI. How many calls are you going to make? How many hits is it going to get? Do you need to be consumption based? Do you blah, 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 which are, worth thinking about and digging into. And I'm not going to cover that because lots of consultancy will go, hey, that's our job to have that. But there is lots of materials for people to go out and have those thoughts and conversations. So I think it's great. I feel that Microsoft's making that consideration a lot easier for people. They're starting to help guide people towards that more effectively, because they're learning, and everyone is still very much learning at this stage. And it was really good to see that presentation. Very, very much enjoyed that.
Yeah, in terms of the going down the custom Copilot route, if that's something that you're interested in, there is tooling available to build custom Copilots inside Teams, or custom engine Copilots now, as we're referring to them. So if you hear that custom engine Copilot, then it's build your own essentially. We've got Teams AI library that helps you build AI capable bots in Teams. So it's very specific to teams, which makes things a little bit easier.
Sorry, Garry, quick question. Is there a rule that every time someone says bots, they have to down a shot now because it's banned, or is that still allowed?
I hope not. But yeah, there's the tooling that's there, and then you have the the services from Azure. So Azure OpenAI service. Like I said, the OpenAI models that are available. Like I said, the new model is available straight away as one of the announcements that it's there. It's available for you to use, and then it comes with all of the safety checks, compliance that you get with using a service in Azure. So all of the tools are there for you to go and build these custom copilots as well.
Yeah, and probably worth mentioning AI Studio as well. One of the sessions I'll put in there that I haven't had a chance to watch, but Henk Bowman and Dan Laskovitz did a session of Copilot Studio versus AI Studio. I mean, they seem to have missed the whole team's AI and the other side, but well, I've had that argument with Dan already, but do want to watch that. So I think that's an interesting one. And for me, I see a lot of that of, if you're looking at employees, you've got to focus on teams. You've got to focus on that internal view of things. If you're looking external, then the Azure AI Studio comes in there, and Copilot Studio stretches a bit across both. So think about those things is key. We're kind of coming close to the hour. Was there anything else that you particularly wanted to wrap up on, Garry?
Not particularly. All I'd say is, if you weren't able to see some of the sessions at Build, there'll be sessions that we'll put in the notes. I guess the key ones from the Copilot extensibility perspective and building custom copilots as well is, just go back through the schedule. The recordings should now all be there by the time this is published. So you should be able to go and view them, download them as well, and get up to speed on this. But things are in preview. Things will be coming over the coming weeks and months. So it's a, here are some announcements, but it's not the end. There are more things coming, and just things change, right? If you tried Copilot 3 months ago, try it again. Chances are you'll get different. Okay. Any Copilot. We're in the world of experimentation, but major improvements in AI, as we've seen, just in general. So make sure you're going back and just trying things again, because things are only getting better as well. So just keep trying it and see where you are. And if you have any questions, then bombard us with your questions. We'll do our best to help.
Yeah, absolutely great. And wrapping up the show, let us know what more you want to hear, or if you want to hear more on custom extensibility, particular areas and voices. I might try and see if I can get maybe even Dan and Henk to come on the show. That could be quite fun to grab them together and share that one as well. But thank you, Garry. One of the things trying to kind of highlight of events coming up, we've got Commsverse in, I think, almost exactly a month's time over in the UK, and I know there's going to be a lot of good Copilot sessions and some dev sessions on there. Are you coming to Scottish Summit, Garry, in October?
I'm not. No. I'm in a rare situation. I don't have any events planned in, so
nothing bad at all.
Yeah, nothing.
I'm definitely going to be hassling people and getting you to come to ESPC in December as well, which I think
that'd be nice.
On that, I would say one other session, June the 20th. I'm part of the Experts Live UK organising committee. It's a community-powered set of user groups. We're looking to move towards having a conference at some point. Nothing confirmed yet. On there, so we're going to run some user groups, and June the 20th we're in London at the Advania HQ. We've got Amy Boyd coming to talk about AI, and Steve Goodman's going to be talking about agents and bringing someone with him to talk about autogen and the elements there. And I think agents, one of the things we haven't touched on too much in this episode. I'm hoping Zoe and Chris will cover a bit more, but it's a really interesting space that's evolving there. So if you have a look at expertslive.co.uk is the website with information and how to register on that. So keep an eye out for that. And a final plug for month of Copilots coming up in June. Go to copilotconnection.com/month of Copilots, or just go on the main page and click from there, and you can register and be alerted when all those sessions come up. And also, if you want to hear more, then please subscribe to us. We're on LinkedIn, we're on X, we're on YouTube. Go and follow us there and be the first to hear as our videos for Month of Copilot and all these podcast episodes come through from there. So tell your clients, tell your friends, even tell your partners. Drop some reviews in there. I need to have a look before to see if there's any reviews, but please put all those things in. I want to say huge thank you to Garry for stepping in and coming and join this chat today. Really enjoyed that. Reminded me of the good old days.
Yeah, thanks. It's been good to chat. Good to be here.
Absolutely. Otherwise, thank you very much and see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.